Double Cross, and Other Skills I Learned as a Super Spy by Jackson Pierce. Chapter 4. "Hail, honey," Mom said the next morning, shaking a carton of orange juice harder than necessary before she poured a glass. "We've got a mission. Should be back late this evening. Emergency numbers for the neighbors and the medics are here." She tapped the refrigerator. She paused to wiggle her torso like something wasn't fitting right in her suit. It was some sort of stretchy combination of leather and Kevlar with a zipper down the front and a turtleneck top. Mom tugged at her utility belt and then continued. "Try to get Kennedy to start her reading. I know, but at least try before dinner. We'll be back before you go to bed, Kennedy," she shouted down the hall. "I'm getting up," Kennedy yelled, which was a lie. "No cheers after 6, got it? The people downstairs keep complaining." "I'm getting up," she yelled again. Kennedy didn't so much rise as she did melt out of bed, always leaving a trail of pillows and blankets behind her. Dad laughed silently at Kennedy as he used the doorframe to stretch his shoulders. Mom finished her juice and joined him, jogging in place for a moment. They moved to the living room to practice punching each other as I slogged through the rest of my oatmeal. "Hail," Dad said, jumping backwards and kicking at Mom's head. "It might be best if you stayed away from Agent Otter's bad side today, all right?" "I try to stay away from all Agent Otter's sides. I'm not sure he'd like me any better if I look like the rest of the class," I grumbled as I rinsed my bowl out and set it in the sink. "Hey now, Hale," Mom said sternly, ducking Dad's fist and kicking him hard in the back of the knee. He started to fall, but she swooped in at the last moment to push him back to his feet. She turned to me while Dad caught his breath. "Heroes don't always look like heroes." This was something she and Dad said a lot. They acted like it was general advice, but I knew it was to try and make me feel better about myself. "Villains don't always look like villains either," Dad added. "Nothing is that simple. Just because Agent Otter isn't always very nice doesn't mean he's your enemy. He's just still grumpy about being taken out of the field. Don't think he ever planned on being a teacher." "Yeah, but he got taken out of the field 1 billion years ago," I griped, but gave up when Dad shot me a pointed look. I changed the subject. "So what's today's mission? Is it Project—" I fell silent because I was about to say Project Ground Cover, but then remembered how serious Mom and Dad were about me never mentioning that again. They clearly realized what was about to come out of my mouth, though, because they froze and gave me matching stern looks. "It's in Spain, I think," Mom said, without answering my question, which I suspected meant yes. She turned back to Dad. She bounced forward and back on the balls of her feet, waiting for him to strike. "Spain?" Dad said, shaking out his arms. "I thought Fishburne said Seoul." "Maybe. SRS has outposts in both places, don't they?" Mom shrugged. "We lived in SRS's biggest location, but SRS was an international agency. Agents were tucked away throughout the world. It was sort of nice knowing no matter where my parents went, they had allies nearby." I leaned in the doorframe. "Do you really not know, or do you just not want to tell me?" "Come on, Hale," Dad said, smiling. "You don't trust us?" "You're spies," I said warily, and turned to go to my bedroom and change. "We're your parents," Mom called back, laughing. "Also spies," I answered. It was uniform day. I often called Uniform Day by a variety of names, mostly involving words I heard Agent Otter muttering when the drink machine stole his dollar. I understand why spies have to wear black spandex. I do, really. You couldn't exactly crawl under laser grid wearing shorts and a t-shirt. What I didn't understand was why anyone would make black spandex. Did a bunch of fabric company people get together somewhere to intentionally create the worst material on the planet? Or was it the result of some crazy factory accident? Surely no one made this stuff on purpose. "All right," Agent Otter said, walking briskly into our classroom. He scratched his head without looking at us. "Come on, formation." We hustled into neat rows in the center of the room, barely fitting in between the weightlifting equipment. Otter turned to the door as the SRS uniform mistress entered. Ms. Elma was an older lady with pale brown hair and a thin scar on one cheek. She was famous for this scar. She got it in a knife fight and sewed up the wound herself during a brief stint as a field agent. This was a story she liked to remind us at every opportunity. "Your uniform doesn't fit? I'm so sorry. I suppose I'm not as good at sewing spandex as I am at sewing my own face." She was also known for her undying love for the Dr. Joe talk show. Let me explain Dr. Joe for you in one sentence. TV doctor with gray hair tells you to eat more salmon. I thought the show was super boring, but Ms. Elma and a few of the other agents here watched Dr. Joe like he was the soulmate they'd never met. I'd even heard that Ms. Elma wrote the guy love letters. Dad said she was just being a fan. Mom said she was just being delusional. Tossed over Ms. Elma's right arm were dozens and dozens of SRS uniforms. Black spandex with blue trim that indicated our in-training status. "Stand up straight so I can see your shoulders," she barked, and we all jumped, straightening our spines. Ms. Elma chewed her tongue for a moment and then began to toss uniforms to us with complete confidence, despite the fact that she was hardly looking at them. "Go change. Come back. Fast, please. And no primping, ladies. I don't have time for that. It's a uniform, not a prom dress." One by one, students vanished from the formation as they ducked into the bathrooms to try on uniforms. All SRS trainees wore the hand-me-downs of older SRS members. Every now and then, someone would get lucky and be fitted with the suit on its first go-round, but for the most part, our uniforms came complete with rips, tears, and burns, and a bouquet of problems that we'd only add to before handing them down yet again. Once, I got one that had a whole leg spray-painted pink. I discovered that day the only thing worse than black spandex is pink spandex. And, "Hail, Jordan," Ms. Elma said, a note of exhaustion in her voice. She looked down at the uniforms in her hand, then unfolded one and held it up in front of me. "No." She tossed it over her shoulder and held up another, pursing her lips in a way that made her look like a duck. Finally, she shoved the second uniform at me. "Try this, Jordan. It might work." I nodded and trotted off towards the bathroom with my uniform. Walter and the other two boys in our class were still there, turning back and forth in front of the mirror, and I couldn't help but think Ms. Elma had warned the wrong people not to primp. Walter's arms were squeezed tightly into his sleeves. When I walked in, he turned to me and grinned. "Hey there, cheater," he said. "Don't worry, my uniform doesn't fit either." With that, he hunched his shoulders forward and flexed his arm muscles until the seams of his already battered uniform gave way along his biceps. He laughed, the sound all echoey in the bathroom, and high-fived Michael and Cameron, his junior agent best friends. They too had exceptionally large biceps, which I envied, and even larger foreheads, which was about the only thing I could silently make fun of them for. "I wasn't worried," I answered. "You might be, though, when Miss Elma sees your sleeves." Walter's face paled a little, but he still managed to snort. "Yeah, whatever, whale." Sometimes I pretended Walter hadn't changed due to puberty. He'd just fallen into some toxic sludge, and that was why he transformed from totally normal guy Walter to worst person at SRS Walter. One day he's coming over after school, the next he has a little facial hair and is busy in the afternoon. One day he's huffing and puffing through the field exam along with me, the next he's sprinting along with the junior agents, looking like a fairy godmother granted him the gift of calf muscles. It's not like Walter and I had a big fight or anything. One day we were friends, the next we weren't. Was it better or worse that way? I couldn't tell. I walked into a stall, double-checked the door was locked, and began to change. My feet went in easily, as did my legs, but when it came time to pull the uniform over my torso, things came to a grinding halt. I shimmied and twisted and managed to get the shoulders up. I could even zip it a little, so long as it didn't need to do things like breathe or eat or have to pee. All in all, it was at least a better fit than my last uniform, which I couldn't even pull past my stomach. I walked out of the stall, trying not to move too much, and made my way back to the classroom. "I don't know what I expected, Miss Elma. They're just ripped," Walter said as I reached the door. The foreheads nodded earnestly behind him. "Showing off?" Miss Elma snapped, and Walter shrank. I was pretty sure I saw a quiver in his lip. "Always with the showing off at this level," she said, all this through a mouthful of pins, so everything sounded vaguely like a hiss. She was pinning the legs of a girl's uniform to mark for alterations. Ms. Elma was always talking about how our uniforms should feel like a second skin. They should fit like a glove. I questioned the sort of gloves Ms. Elma wore. I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of a chrome-legged press machine. I looked like I'd been eaten by an enormous seal. "All right, Jordan," Otter said, motioning me towards Miss Elma. "You're up." Miss Elma looked at me and shook her head. "What are we going to do about this?" I couldn't tell if she meant me or the uniform. "Perhaps we can use one of the others. Sew some side panels in?" Otter nodded. "Probably." "I wasn't talking to you, Steve," Miss Elma said, waving him off without looking at him. Otter folded his arms, opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. Ms. Elma buzzed around me, tugging here, pushing there. She suddenly had a tape measure in her hands, though I couldn't have told you where it came from. "Right, well, Hale, it'll take me a few days, but you'll have a uniform." She said this like the uniform was something I desperately wanted. 20 minutes later, everyone who needed alterations had handed their uniforms back to Ms. Elma, who headed to the next classroom. Otter dug out a folder full of papers from a battered-looking leather satchel we all called a purse behind his back. "Practice missions," he said. He wrapped the folder against his palm, then sniffled in a way that made him look like a pug. Inside the folder were fake missions, many of which we'd been through before, and many of which were simulations of real closed missions. He opened the folder and held out the papers, and my classmates dived, snatched, and reading them hurriedly. Many were already running to the computer lab or to the disguise department by the time I reached for one of my own. Otter slammed the folder shut and withdrew it. I looked up at him and tried not to stare at his coffee-stained mustache. "Jordan," Otter said in a sneery way, "I've got a special mission for you." The first time I was sent on a special mission was when I was around Kennedy's age. Everyone else in my class was leaping off ropes onto sets of scaffolding. I, however, was swinging at the bottom of a rope like a human pendulum. When my teacher told me that she had a special mission for me, one that involved leaving SRS, I was ecstatic. Everyone who wanted to leave SRS had to check out, of course, but kids that age never got to leave without supervision. Yet there I was, getting assigned a special mission, going out on my own. The other 9-year-olds would be so jealous. And then I realized the mission was really just a trip to get her some coffee at the shop outside headquarters. It wasn't a mission, it was an errand. I trudged towards the front office, trying to wash the bitter off my face. I didn't want Otter or anyone else to know how much this stuff got to me. "Oh, Hale, are you getting coffee?" the agent at the exit desk asked. She reached for her purse, and I began to wish I'd just snuck out through the loading docks. "Nope," I said, and her face fell. "Dry cleaning for Agent Otter." The agent slouched in her chair and went back to staring at her computer screen. They didn't even bother having me sign out anymore. This happened so often. I walked onto the elevator, bracing myself on the railing in the back. Shooting up 6 flights in about a second always made me lose my balance. On the upper level, the doors opened, revealing a grubby office building with vinyl chairs and orange-green tile. A young woman wearing lots of eyeshadow, an SRS agent, looked up at me from the desk, tilted her chin to say hello, and then went back to painting her toenails fuchsia while the Dr. Joe played loudly on her laptop. I breezed past her, out the doors, and onto the street. SRS was located in a pretty little town called Castlebury, the sort of place where they strung Christmas lights between old brick buildings and had a parade for just about every holiday, right down to National Grapefruit Day. I'm serious. Obviously, the people of Castlebury didn't have a clue that right under their feet was a program of elite spies and their spy-in-training kids. I glanced back at the building I just emerged from. A sign with missing letters read, BRMBY County Substitute Mathematics Teacher Training. The label pretty much meant no one would ever come inside. On the rare occasion someone did, the upper-level agent's job was to pretend to be an overworked receptionist and ask the visitor about fixing copy machines until they left. No one on the outside knew about SRS. Well, I guess some politician somewhere had to, since we were technically a government organization. But it just wasn't safe for everyone to know about us. A spy's greatest weapon was anonymity, after all. It didn't take me long to retrieve the dry cleaning. I held the plastic garment bags over my head, but I still wasn't tall enough to keep the bottoms from dragging on the ground. The agent/receptionist didn't even look up at me this time as I walked to the elevator and pushed the down button. The down button didn't light up. I frowned and pushed it again. The light was probably just out. But no, I couldn't hear the sound of the elevator coming up. I turned to the receptionist, who was now looking at me with an eyebrow raised. "Is it broken?" I asked. "No," she said, frowning, and lifted the ancient cream-colored phone. "Hello? I've got that kid up here. The coffee kid? Yeah. The elevator? Oh." The way she said "oh" was different. It was so different that I abandoned the elevator and walked towards her. She cupped her hands over her mouth, mumbled a few things into the phone, and then quickly hung up. She avoided my eyes. I saw her rubbing her toes together anxiously, ruining her wet nail polish. Spies notice these things. "Someone will be here in a minute to escort you back," she said. "The whole place just went on lockdown." Lockdown? Why? Lockdown was serious. It meant something on a mission had gone wrong. So doors were locked, files were reviewed, and records were studied. No one came or went, so information couldn't be lost or shuffled or forgotten. The receptionist's lips parted, but then we heard the elevator begin to move. It chimed. The doors opened. My eyes widened. It was Agent Otter, and to his right was Dr. Fishburne, the director of SRS. He wore a shiny gray suit, the same color as his hair. "Hale?" Dr. Fishburne said. His voice sounded like that of a blue hand soap smells, all crisp and sharp and sinus-clearing. "Come with us, please." "What's going on?" I asked cautiously. Otter spoke now, voice gruff and wildly unlike the snaky tone he normally took with me. "It's your parents, Hale. They've been compromised."